Thanks so much. I want to begin by talking about the news for a lot of auto workers, across the country, particularly in Windsor, the plant that we went to. Auto workers woke up today with a 25% tariff on automotive imposed by Donald Trump. This is a direct attack on these workers, and for the workers that I met at Stellantis, they woke up to an announcement now that their plant has been shut down for 2 weeks. And what that means for these workers who, like all workers now, are using their entire budget to pay their bills and to keep food on the table, they're wondering how they're going to actually make ends meet with 2 weeks less salary. I don't think anyone can do that in the current times we're in. No one can make it without half your pay, basically, without working 2 weeks this month. That means they're going to be wondering how they're going to make their mortgage payment, how they're going to pay their groceries, their bills. And so I'm thinking about those workers. I'm thinking about the steel and aluminum workers who are already living under those tariffs and those workers who've already lost their jobs. And so our job number one has to be protecting these workers. And what I mean by that specifically is our employment insurance right now, the way it's set, effectively for a lot of these workers maybe only covers about a third of their income. How can most people make it with just a third of their income? You simply can't. So we need to have an EI that covers more of workers' salaries so they can actually pay their bills, pay their mortgage, keep food on the table. And that's got to be job number one today in the face of these tariffs, in the face of the impact on workers. We need to protect these workers and make sure that they can actually keep their homes, keep food on the table, and keep paying their bills. And secondly, this reminds us that we've got to fight back and make sure that we are building a stronger economy in our country, and that means building Canadian and buying Canadian. We need a clear plan to build the infrastructure that we need in our country using Canadian products, Canadian steel, Canadian aluminum, Canadian lumber. We need to use Canadian products and Canadian workers to build up a stronger economy, one that's more resilient. We also need to defend our interests. With these automotive sector tariffs that Donald Trump's imposed, we have to make sure that these companies do not take the manufacturing equipment, the assets that we've invested in, out of the country. We cannot let that happen. We have to put in whatever protections possible, laws to ban that from happening, protections in place so that we do not lose those assets, we do not lose that manufacturing capacity. And then in general, when it comes to this tariff, while we haven't seen the full brunt of it, we're experiencing the impacts of some of those tariffs right now, and we're living in constant fear of tariffs. And so Canadians have made a really tough decision. They said, you know what, we're going to fight back. Canadians are making decisions to not buy, to boycott American products. They're picking up items at the shelves and saying, wait a second, is this Canadian or is this American? They are canceling their trips to the United States. And I want to commend Canadians for showing that resilience and that defiance and say, you know, I'm going to fight back. I'm going to defend my country. I'm going to fight back and protect our home. And so I want to give Canadians another chance to do that, another chance to contribute. When Canadians are looking for ways, what can I do? Well, here's something that you can do. We are announcing New Democrats will bring in a victory bond, like we did in the World War. This is an opportunity for Canadians to invest in our country. In fact, during the World War, victory bonds raised more revenue than taxes because Canadians were so committed to doing their part. So right now, for Canadians who are wondering, how can I contribute? A victory bond would be a guaranteed investment where you would purchase a bond, a 5-year or 10-year, and if you hold it to maturity, you would get all the revenue tax-free. So it's a way to, we're going to need to raise money to be able to build the roads, the bridges, the infrastructure we need. Instead of relying solely on banks and paying debt and interest to those banks, let's pay interest to Canadians instead. And so I'm inviting Canadians to do their part, and this would be a way to do so. In contrast with the other parties, Mark Carney has said that, yes, we need to invest in building infrastructure in Canada, but he's also said the way to do that is to cut the services that Canadians need. I think Mark Carney is wrong. We cannot afford to cut the services Canadians need. At this time when we're up against so much uncertainty, Canadians need that support. We need our health care, we need our pensions, so the threat of cutting those things to pay for investments is wrong. And Pierre Poilievre's plan is deep cuts. His plan is deep cuts to the things that you need. That is the wrong thing to do. Deep cuts to health care, to child care, is only going to make life even more difficult and more uncertain in the face of these troubling times that we're in right now. So Pierre Poilievre's approach is also very wrong. We're saying we don't have to choose between investing in our country and in our infrastructure and keeping our services. We need to do both. We need a strong and vibrant healthcare. We need to fix it. We need to invest in it. We need good pensions. We need good services. And we need to build up an economy where we invest in our infrastructure. And this is one way to assist Canadians in doing that, by investing in Canada through victory bonds. Donc, d'abord, je veux commencer en reconnaissant comment aujourd'hui c'est une journée difficile pour les travailleurs dans le secteur automobile. Ils se sont réveillés aujourd'hui avec un tarif de 25%. Et l'impact est réel. On a des travailleurs, j'ai rencontré ces travailleurs de Stellantis qui se sont réveillés aujourd'hui et leur usine est fermée pour 2 semaines. Comment est-ce que quelqu'un peut rejoindre les deux bouts avec moins de 2 semaines de salaire? 2 semaines de salaire de moins. C'est impossible parce qu'à cause de la coût de la vie, plusieurs travailleurs, la majorité des travailleurs, utilisent tout leur salaire pour rejoindre les deux bouts. Donc, c'est un temps difficile pour eux. Je pense des travailleurs dans le secteur aluminium et acier qui ont déjà vécu l'impact de ces tarifs, qui ont déjà perdu leurs emplois. Donc, notre travail numéro 1, c'est de protéger ces travailleurs. Ça, c'est pourquoi on doit augmenter l'assurance emploi. Et pourquoi je dis ça? Parce qu'à ce moment, l'assurance emploi, en effet, pour plusieurs travailleurs, couvre seulement un tiers de leur salaire à cause des limites. Donc, on doit augmenter l'assurance emploi pour qu'on puisse aider les travailleurs à rejoindre le deux bouts, avoir la capacité de payer leurs factures, les hypothèques et faire l'épicerie. Et deuxièmement, on doit bâtir une économie plus résiliente. Ça veut dire qu'on doit construire l'infrastructure au Canada en utilisant les produits canadiens, l'acier canadien, l'aluminium canadien, le bois d'œuvre canadien, pour construire plus d'infrastructures, pour créer des bons emplois. Ça, c'est quelque chose qu'on doit faire. Et on doit défendre nos intérêts. Ça veut dire l'équipement dans les usines où on a contribué. On doit arrêter ces entreprises de prendre cet équipement, de traverser la frontière avec cet équipement. Donc, on doit arrêter ça. Et je veux noter, face à la menace de Donald Trump, malgré le fait qu'on n'a pas vu un grand tarif contre tous les autres secteurs, on a la menace de n'importe quel jour que Donald Trump peut encore mettre en place des tarifs. Mais je suis fier de voir le fait que les Canadiens se sont dit qu'on va défendre notre pays. Et ils ont décidé eux-mêmes de boycotter les produits canadiens. Et ils ont annulé leurs vacances aux États-Unis pour dire non, on ne va pas dépenser l'argent aux États-Unis pendant qu'on a cette guerre commerciale, pendant qu'on a ces menaces contre notre pays. Et je suis fier de voir ça, cette résilience, cette défiance. C'est tellement encourageant de voir ça. Et je veux donner une autre occasion pour les Canadiens de contribuer. Aujourd'hui, j'annonce qu'un gouvernement néo-démocrate va introduire les emprunts de la victoire, comme on a fait pendant la guerre mondiale. À l'époque, les emprunts de la victoire ont levé plus de fonds, plus de revenus que les taxes, que les impôts. Donc, c'est une façon puissante d'avoir la capacité d'utiliser la puissance des Canadiens qui veulent contribuer. Donc, on va avoir des investissements avec un intérêt garanti. Et si vous maintenez vos investissements, vous allez recevoir le revenu libre impôt, libre des taxes. Donc, ça, c'est une façon de contribuer. Et dans ces temps difficiles, les Canadiens veulent contribuer. Et ça, c'est une façon. Au lieu de lever les fonds, avoir les revenus seulement avec les dettes, où on paye les banques, et dans ce cas, on paye les gens. On paye l'intérêt aux Canadiens, Canadiennes, aux Québécois et Québécoises. Mais c'est quoi le plan des autres chefs? Mark Carney a dit que oui, on doit investir dans notre infrastructure, mais pour payer pour ces investissements, il propose de couper les services. Je pense que c'est la mauvaise chose à faire à ce moment, de couper dans les services dont les gens ont besoin. Ce n'est pas le bon moment de faire ça. Dans mon avis, on ne doit jamais couper les services pour les gens. Et c'est quoi le plan de Pierre Poilievre? Pierre Poilievre propose dans son plan, il veut couper massivement dans les services dont vous avez besoin, comme le service de garde, comme les soins de santé. Et propose de couper. Et ça va vous coûter cher. Ce n'est pas la bonne chose à faire à ce moment. Ça va empirer les choses. Donc, notre plan, c'est on peut investir dans l'infrastructure et garder nos services. Et c'est une façon de faire ça avec les emprunts de la victoire. Merci. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm ready for any questions you might have.
Merci beaucoup. Maintenant, on va passer à la période de questions. Une question, une relance par journaliste. We'll now take the questions from the press. One question, one follow-up. We'll begin with Janice McGregor, CBC.
Good morning. When the Government of Canada stopped selling Canada Savings Bonds in 2017, it said it was doing so because the program was expensive to administer. There was better, more efficient ways for the government to raise revenue, but also that consumers had other investment options where they could have better returns than Canada Savings Bonds, and that's why the whole idea was sort of seen as a thing of the past. What makes you think that the bonds you're proposing now in this context are going to be any more successful than Canada Savings Bonds were, a decade or so ago?
Well, I think at first I want to acknowledge that that's true, that the savings bonds, of course, were discontinued, and the cost of administration at that point was higher than the uptake of the program. We're in a very different context right now. Canadians are making choices on their own, difficult choices. They're canceling vacations. It costs them to do that. It's difficult to do that. They're choosing to buy things that are Canadian instead of buying American products. On their own, Canadians saying, I want to do my part. So we're in a very different moment. We are in a type of war right now, in a trade war. And the threat of Donald Trump has made Canadians say, what can I do to stand up and defend my country? And for those Canadians who want to contribute, here's a way to do so. So we're in a very different context, and I'm very confident that if we use all the different means of providing people information about this, post offices, government announcements, using the avenues that we have, Canadians do want to do their part, and this is a way for Canadians to contribute. And we saw it when there's a need, like during the war. The Canadians invested massively in victory bonds. We are in a similar situation with a trade war, with the threats of Donald Trump. Canadians are really wrapping themselves in the flag and saying, I want to do my part, and here's the way Canadians can do their part. And it's in stark contrast to the proposals of the other parties. Pierre Poilievre is saying, cut the services Canadians need to give tax giveaways to the richest. Mark Carney is saying, investments in infrastructure, yes, but I'm going to pay for that by cutting the services that people need. I think both those approaches are wrong. This is a way to say, let's invest in Canada and give Canadians a chance to do so. Oui, donc dans le passé, oui, c'est vrai qu'on a eu des investissements dans le Canada qui n'ont pas fonctionné à l'époque et donc on a annulé ces programmes. Mais on est dans une situation tellement différente. Les Canadiens et les Canadiennes, les Québécois et les Québécoises eux-mêmes ont décidé d'annuler les vacances aux États-Unis. Ils sont prêts de prendre des sacrifices pour protéger notre pays. Donc, dans ce contexte où les Canadiens ont cette volonté de défendre notre pays, ça, c'est une façon de le faire. C'est une façon de contribuer dans notre nation, dans notre pays, et contribuer pour investir davantage dans les infrastructures qu'on a besoin.
I'd like to get some clarification about something you said near the end of an answer yesterday about the future of CUSMA. If I understood you correctly, you said that you aren't in favor of moving to a renegotiation or a review before it's due in 2026, that there were other ways to fight back against tariffs in the meantime. Of course, there's a lot of hot takes out there about this. We've had premiers calling for a negotiation faster, sooner, but maybe throwing Mexico under the bus, just pursuing a Canada-US deal alone. And a week ago, Mark Carney seemed to suggest that actually there might not be a fulsome renegotiation of CUSMA. I'd like some clarity on where the NDP stands about whether there should still be a North American trade agreement with Mexico. Is that what the NDP wants to continue?
Yeah, we want to be in solidarity with Mexico. In fact, right now, we are being targeted, like Mexico, unjustly, unfairly. There's a trade agreement that's been signed by this very president, who now is violating an agreement that he himself signed. And he's targeting, without provocation, Canada and Mexico. I think it's a moment of solidarity with Mexico. We are in a similar position where we've been attacked for no justification, for no reason. So we should show solidarity in fighting back together. And I stand by my comments. It sets a very bad precedent to renegotiate an agreement when the date that was set is in a year. There is no reason to renegotiate. Nothing has happened significantly that caused these tariffs in the first place, or this unjustified war in the first place. There's no justification to cancel the agreement before its end date.
Thank you.
Oui. Je pense qu'on doit rester en solidarité avec le Mexique. Donc, je ne suis pas d'accord avec l'idée de jeter dehors ou laisser à côté le Mexique. Je pense qu'on doit être en solidarité parce que Donald Trump a attaqué effectivement nous deux sans provocation, sans raison, dans une manière injustifiée. Donc, on doit rester en solidarité. Et je maintiens ma position qu'on ne doit pas renégocier une entente quand c'est le même président qui a signé cette entente et puis il a brisé cette entente. Ça envoie un mauvais message de dire oui, on est prêt de maintenant renégocier quelque chose quand il a signé cette entente et la date finale, c'est la date pour la renégociation, c'est la prochaine année.
Merci. Now, Mark Ramsey, Toronto Star.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. If Canadians elect a minority Liberal government, what is one specific thing they would have to do to get your support?
Well, I can tell you that we have shown Canadians in minority governments that we fight for you, and we're going to continue to do that. We know that this election is very important, and I encourage you to vote for New Democrats. More New Democrats means more folks are going to fight for you. You elect enough of us, I would be honored to serve as Prime Minister, and I would fight every single day for you. Canadians will make that choice, and the choice that Canadians make, I want you to know that what choice you make, I will use the power that I have to fight for you. Some concrete examples, I believe that pharmacare is a good thing. It lowers the cost of medication for provinces. It saves money for everybody. It takes the burden off of families who say, I can't afford to buy the medication I need to stay healthy. I would expand that very directly. I want to expand it so more provinces sign up to the program, and I want to cover more medications. And what Mark Carney has said is that he's not committed to that. So it shows you that if you want pharmacare, vote for New Democrats.
Okay. And given how the polls look for the NDP right now, do you think you are an asset or a liability to NDP candidates hoping to get elected?
Well, I've shown folks that I love campaigning, and I believe that we've got a really important offer to make for Canadians. And so for candidates out there, keep on fighting hard. People need you. They need your experiences in your communities. They need what you have offered, the people that you want to serve. We need you, and Canadians need you. Because in this difficult time, people are wondering who's going to actually fight for me, who's going to fight for my family. That's New Democrats. We're committed to you and your families. We're not in it for the billionaires. We're not in it for the rich CEOs. We're in it for you.
Thank you. Now, Davis Legree, iPolitics.
Mr. Singh, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
First question was, the Canadian auto sector has basically said that Canada shouldn't impose retaliatory tariffs on U.S. autos in response to yesterday's news. Do you think that American autos should be exempt in any countermeasures that the Carney government brings forward?
I've long maintained the position that we need to retaliate dollar for dollar. If we're being attacked, we need to fight back. We also know that these tariffs are going to hurt Americans, and we've said that from the beginning. We're already seeing that Donald Trump's approach is like an arsonist who's setting fire not to just our economy, but his own economy as well. But we need to show that we're ready to fight back and defend our country.
And just as a follow-up, do you think that Mark Carney deserves any credit for Canada being exempt from the 10% baseline tariff that Trump announced yesterday?
I don't think there's anything that Mark Carney did specifically to result in that. But again, when it comes to our fight against Donald Trump, I'm on Team Canada. I want us to win. I want us to do well. And I think that we're up against a very volatile, unpredictable Donald Trump. And I don't know if there's anything that we've done that has caused this outcome. But we got to stay strong and fight back. Je ne sais pas si c'est quelque chose que Mark Carney a fait ou non. Mais je veux qu'on gagne cette bataille. Et je pense qu'on est dans une bataille avec quelqu'un qui n'est pas rationnel, on ne sait pas ce qu'il va faire à chaque moment. Je ne pense pas qu'il sait ce qu'il va faire à chaque moment. Donc, quand on parle de comment on fait face à Donald Trump, je suis sur l'équipe Canada et on doit gagner ces batailles.
Merci. Maintenant, Juliane Lapointe, Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh. Si vous étiez Premier ministre aujourd'hui, ce serait quoi votre première action face aux tarifs et est-ce que vous croyez qu'il faudrait imposer des contre-tarifs dès aujourd'hui?
Oui, on doit imposer des contre-tarifs et ma première action, oui, aujourd'hui, parce que à cause de le fait que Donald Trump a imposé des tarifs contre nous, et ma première action, c'est de protéger les travailleurs, parce que on a des travailleurs déjà impactés par ces tarifs et à ce moment, ils n'ont pas la protection adéquate pour rejoindre les deux bouts, pour payer les factures. Et ça, c'est un problème. Donc, un gouvernement néo-démocrate va immédiatement protéger les travailleurs.
Avec votre idée de bond de la victoire, est-ce qu'on doit peut-être s'inquiéter de créer un climat de peur parce qu'on pense tout de suite à la guerre, par exemple? Est-ce que vous avez pensé à ça, le message que ça peut lancer sur l'inquiétude en annonçant votre programme?
Je pense que c'est vrai, on est dans une guerre commerciale. Et c'est une guerre qu'on n'a pas voulu, c'est une guerre qu'on n'a pas provoquée. Donald Trump l'a fait lui-même, mais on est dans une guerre commerciale avec les menaces sur nos travailleurs. Et on a déjà eu des impacts, on a déjà eu des blessures. On a perdu des emplois au Canada à cause seulement des menaces et aussi à cause des tarifs sur l'aluminium, l'acier et le secteur automobile. Donc, on a vécu les impacts. On doit reconnaître qu'on est dans une guerre commerciale et on doit défendre notre pays. Donc, mon annonce aujourd'hui, ça parle de comment les Canadiens peuvent contribuer dans cette guerre. We are in a war. We're in a trade war. It's a war that was unprovoked, unjustified, frankly illegal, one that we did not want, but we're in one. And Canadians, while they're worried, they're also defiant and want to stand up and fight back. And the victory bond announcement today is a way for Canadians to fight back. It's for Canadians who are wondering, what else can I do? I've boycotted American products. I've canceled my trip to the States. What else can I do? Because I want to do more to protect my country. Well, here's a way. It's what we did in the past. When we were in the world wars, we had victory bonds. It's a way for Canadians to say, you know what, I want to do my part. I want to invest in this country, and here's a way to do so.
Thank you. Now, Rachel Aiello, CTV.
Good morning. Just 4.7% of Canadians prefer you as Prime Minister, around 8% support for your party overall. Is this the last election where the NDP are a real factor?
You know, this is a question we get at pretty much every election. If you go back, we'll get the same questions, similar questions in every election. I'm always going to be here to fight back for Canadians. New Democrats are always going to be there. I'm sure the other parties would love for us to not be there, to point out that their plans are going to hurt Canadians. I know that they would love for us to not point out that Mark Carney, when he talks about investing, in the same man talks about cutting services that Canadians need. That's going to hurt them. That Pierre Poilievre's plan entirely is just to cut the things that you need, to cut healthcare, to cut childcare, and it's going to cost you. I'm sure they would love for us to not be here. We're not going anywhere. We're going to continue to fight for Canadians like we have throughout the history of this country. We will always be a voice for the people, and we'll never back down from that.
And we're seeing you engage a lot on social media during this campaign. I'm just wondering, are you confident that that is going to translate into votes, or is there a risk that that kind of social media activity could portray you as less serious?
We want to use every tool to be able to speak to Canadians where they are. Right now, lots of folks are on social media. It's a way to connect with people, so we're going to use that tool. I want folks to know the important choice they have in this election. Mark Carney and the Liberals who want to cut from the services that you need. Pierre Poilievre who wants to cut massively from things like dental care, health care, and child care. Or New Democrats who want to stand up for you, strengthen those programs, and lower your bills. That's the choice in this election.
Thank you. Now, Emily House, Globe and Mail.
Hi. We're in an affordability crisis, and I know that you've mentioned the high cost of living. What makes you think that people have money to put into these victory bonds?
Well, we're certainly in an affordability crisis, and so for some Canadians, it's not going to be a choice for them. A lot of Canadians are still making choices around where they invest and how they invest their money. This is a good way for people to say, I've got some room in my investments, and I want to invest and do my part in defending our country. Here's a way to do that. There's always a climate where people make some investments. We want to give people a choice to invest in Canada. When we talk about how we raise revenue to build up our country in the face of these threats that we're up against, often the only solution people look at are getting more loans or debt financed from banks. This is a way to say, well, we can get investments from Canadians and pay Canadians interest instead. I think it's a very powerful tool. and it has worked in the past during the victory bonds in the world wars that I mentioned. And right now we're in a really tough time. We're in a trade war, and Canadians who can contribute, here's a way to do so. Oui, on est dans une crise d'abordabilité. C'est plus que jamais difficile de rejoindre les deux bouts. Et pour des Canadiens qui ne peuvent pas se permettre d'investir, ils ne vont pas. Mais il y a plusieurs Canadiens qui prennent des décisions d'investissement. Et pour eux, l'idée d'avoir les emprunts de la victoire, ça donne une occasion pour investir dans notre pays, pour défendre notre pays contre les menaces de Donald Trump. Et je pense que c'est une bonne idée.
And how much money are you expecting to raise from this?
Well, we've got some detailed backgrounders we can give you around similar bonds that have been effective in other countries to raise revenue. And we are hopeful that this could be a significant tool to raise revenue in Canada. I gave the example that during the World Wars, which is a similar example of Canadian unity and national pride, that it raised more revenue than taxes at that time. And so we're hopeful that this could be a significant increase in revenue, and we'll give you some more details in our background or around some of the other country examples that we have. Sur quoi exactement? Oh, combien? Oui, oui, oui. Oui, donc, on peut vous donner plus de détails. On a des comparaisons avec les autres pays qui ont eu des programmes qui ont réalisé un succès avec des investissements qui sont similaires à ce qu'on a proposé. Donc, on peut vous donner plus de détails. J'ai donné un exemple à l'époque. Je sais que l'époque est différente, mais à l'époque, on a levé plus de fonds avec les emprunts de la victoire pendant la guerre mondiale que les taxes. Donc, c'est un outil puissant et on espère avoir la capacité de lever beaucoup de fonds avec cette annonce aujourd'hui.
Merci. Now, David Turton, CBC.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Singh. I'm just on the victory bond. I'm just reading your press release, and you say the cost of the debt raised from a victory bond will be higher than the debt raised on the capital market. So it seems like these victory bonds, in terms of a borrowing mechanism, would be more expensive than borrowing from private lenders. Is that really the right approach, given where we are when it comes to the deficit, the debt, and, you know, economists are worried that we could be going into a global recession with Trump's tariffs?
Yeah, so it's a bit more costly to raise revenue this way than going to the capital markets. But the difference is we're paying revenue or paying interest back to Canadians. So the money goes back to Canadians who then can spend it in Canada. So while it might cost a bit more, it's an investment that goes back to the people that live in our country who will then spend in our country. So it's net, I think, a much better way to raise funds. And there's an opportunity here where Canadians want to raise funds this way. They want to contribute. And so it gives Canadians a way to fight back. It's a way for us to raise more revenue, to invest in our country. And it also gives back to Canadians instead of giving back interest that we pay to banks. I'd rather pay interest to Canadians. Oui, ça va coûter un peu plus comme façon de lever des fonds en comparaison avec la dette avec les banques. Mais la différence, c'est qu'on paye l'intérêt aux gens, aux Canadiens, aux nos citoyens, au lieu de payer l'intérêt aux banques. Et je préfère ça. Je préfère de donner l'argent aux Canadiens parce qu'ils vont dépenser cet argent au Canada. Donc, je préfère cette façon. C'est une façon de donner une occasion aux Canadiens de contribuer et puis on contribue aux Canadiens.
Last question, Daryl Greer.
And sorry, can I just have a second question? And we didn't hear from you and your response to what Trump announced yesterday. Dozens of countries around the world were hit with the latest round of tariffs. Canada and Mexico got away relatively, were spared some of that, but some tariffs are still in place for Canada. So do you feel like Canada got away and was spared the worst of what could have been, you know, a pretty bad situation from yesterday's announcement from the White House?
Well, factually, it could have been a lot worse, that's true, but we still are up against serious tariffs that are impacting workers right now. Our automobile sector could be decimated with a 25% tariff. A major factory that we visited is going to shut down for 2 weeks. Those workers are not going to have work for 2 weeks. Aluminum and steel workers are already losing their jobs. Factories are slowing down or shutting down in Canada. So we're already experiencing the impact of the tariffs and the threat of tariffs, the fact of that instability. We don't know if Trump will impose a tariff tomorrow, if he changes his mind. That has already caused uncertainty and instability in our country. So we are still faced with some serious threats, and Canadians are still right to want to fight back. And we're giving people a way to fight back with the victory bonds today. Donc, oui, en fait, c'est vrai qu'en fait, ça pourra être, on pourra eu un impact pire que ce qu'on a vécu, mais ça ne dit pas qu'on n'a pas eu des impacts. On a déjà des tarifs sur l'aluminium et l'acier qui a déjà eu des impacts sur ces travailleurs qui ont perdu leurs emplois, et des autres travailleurs qui ont peur qu'ils vont perdre leurs emplois. Et on a déjà vu l'impact sur le secteur automobile. Une grande usine a annoncé qu'ils vont annuler 2 semaines de l'usine et vont être fermés pour 2 semaines. Ça veut dire que les travailleurs vont faire face à ce défi de ne pas avoir un salaire pour 2 semaines. Donc, et on a aussi noté le fait que seulement la menace de Donald Trump a créé de l'instabilité, de l'incertitude. Et ça a aussi créé des impacts, eu des impacts. Donc, on est toujours dans une guerre commerciale, on est toujours dans un temps difficile. Et aujourd'hui, on annonce une façon pour les Canadiens de riposter à cette menace, de contribuer dans notre pays.
Thank you. Now, David Greer, Canadian Press.
So Donald Trump's flair for hyperbole is not exactly a secret. Whether it's performative or provocative or both is perhaps unclear. But how can you reasonably justify kind of invoking this wartime rhetoric in a trade war that's paid in dollars and not in blood?
Because this is a way for Canadians to contribute to building up our country. We are faced with uncertain times, and Canadians want to do their part. Canadians are asking, what more can I do? I meet Canadians all the time who say, well, I'm boycotting American goods, I'm canceling my trip to the United States. What else can I do? Canadians are searching for more ways to stand up for our country. People are wrapping themselves in the flag. People are proud to be Canadian. And here's a way for Canadians to contribute. We have had savings bonds, Canadian savings bonds in the past, and there wasn't the same appetite to invest because there wasn't a reason to do so. Now there is. This is a way for Canadians who want to contribute to do their part, and for Canadians to actually benefit from it, to Canadians to be rewarded for contributing to our country. I think that's a great thing to do, and it's a moment to seize on that national sense of pride and that unity to say, yeah, I want to defend my country, I want to invest in it, let's invest in Canada.
And should the NDP be unsuccessful in growing its seat count if you don't get the breakthroughs you're perhaps hoping for, what does that mean for the future of your leadership of the party, and do you plan to stay on in that case?
Well, I'm not focused on that. I'm focused on the campaign in front of me right now. And I'm focused on what Canadians are struggling with right now and giving Canadians a real choice in this election. If you want someone that's going to fight for you and your family, that's us. If you want someone that's going to give big tax giveaways to big corporations like Brookfield Investment, probably Mark Carney. If you want someone that's going to cut the services you need massively and give big giveaways to billionaires, that's Pierre Poilievre. If you want someone that's going to fight for you and your family, that's me.
Thank you very much. That concludes the press conference. Merci beaucoup. C'est ce qui conclut la conférence de presse. Bonne journée.